All right, so some quick updates on the Saints coaching search. So, as you can see here, Jeremy Fowler of ESPN is reporting that the interview between Kellen Moore and the Saints started Monday night and went late into the evening slash early morning. And then he goes on to say Dolphins DC Anthony Weaver also has come up often as a candidate that's made a strong impression. So, the Saints, we know, flew to Philadelphia to interview Kellen Moore, who is the Eagles' offensive coordinator. They flew to Philadelphia the day after the Eagles won the NFC Championship. Now, the odd thing about it is next week, the Eagles are actually coming to New Orleans and they're going to be using the Saints facility to prepare for the Super Bowl. So, Saints obviously had to go to Philadelphia because next week, Kellen Moore is going to be getting ready for the Super Bowl and isn't allowed to interview. So, it sounds like this thing went well, right? If it goes into the late evening, early morning, I mean, if it was going bad, it wouldn't be that long, right? Um, so Kellen Moore, it looks like at this point is certainly an option, probably the betting favorite, if I was to imagine. It is interesting that Jeremy Fowler mentions Anthony Weaver as well. And one thing I'll say about Anthony Weaver is I went and watched some of his like interviews and conferences and stuff like that, and it's pretty easy to see why he would make a really good impression in an interview type of setting. He just gives off the vibe of the guy that kind of just is really outgoing and has that kind of loud and commanding voice. So it's really easy to see why he might do well in an interview type of setting. So that's an interesting thing to keep our eye on there in that regard. But with that being said, let's take a look at some of these other things that I want to share with you guys. Okay, so this here is from Tony Pauline. He's an NFL insider who is really well respected and connected in league circles. He's not the type to, put stuff out for clickbait. He just posts what he hears, right? And he's been at the Shrine Bowl, Shrine practice. He's going to be at the Senior Bowl, and so he'll be posting a lot of different rumors. It's kind of his thing around draft season, right? That he goes and does. So he posted an article yesterday, and the New Orleans Saints section is pretty interesting. So it says here what the Saints will do for a head coach is anyone's guess. Time and time, people say they have no clue what the organization will do, as they're the only team left with an open vacancy. Rumors that Shrine practice had McCarthy getting the Saints job, but people on Wednesday told me initial conversations with the team have not gone well, and people in New Orleans organization are not enamored with the former Cowboys coach. As mentioned several weeks ago, General Manager Mickey Loomis prefers to keep some of the assistant coaches presently under contract, and many believe that could be the holdup. And then he goes on to say that a lot of people were surprised that Aaron Glenn did not end up getting the job. So this is interesting again because he's reporting that Mickey Loomis prefers to keep some of the assistant coaches presently under contract, and many believe that could be the holdup. This is exactly what was reported a few weeks ago. And Mickey Loomis was directly asked if this was true. I mean, he was directly asked, like, will you let a head coach come in and build the entire staff itself? And he said yes. So the fact that he sat up there on that podium and lied, well, number one, it's not shocking, but it's just like, what are we doing with this guy at this point? Right? Like, why, as a general manager of a football team, when you are tasked with finding the guy to lead your organization, you haven't made the playoffs in years. Your first hire was a loser, right? Why would you not want to bring a head coach in and allow him to build his staff from the ground up? What would even be the point? Like at that point, Mickey, you might as well be the head coach, buddy. Like why would you not want a guy to come in and trust him to do things his way? Is that not the reason you're hiring the guy? Like you come in and, for example, you bring in Kellen Moore, and Kellen Moore is obviously going to run his offense. Well, if some of the assistant coaches on the staff that Mickey wants to keep don't have any experience or time in similar systems that Kellen Moore wants to run, why would Kellen Moore want to keep that? Or why would any other head coach want to keep an assistant that isn't who he hired? It's just so backwards the way that Mickey Loomis is running the Saints right now, and it just doesn't make any sense, right? And then obviously, up here it says that they were initial conversations have not gone well, and let's see, yeah, so it's the next thing I'm going to show you guys, but Mickey Loomis, absolute donut of a general manager. Let's get to the next thing here. Okay, so here we go. This kind of builds on what I was just talking about, right? So, um, she's reporting here, Josina Anderson, I believe is how you pronounce it. A league source tells me some of the questions surrounding Mike McCarthy and the Saints head coach vacancy ever since he became a free agent have involved sentiments over the power structure and communication when it comes to football decisions, length of contract, etc., similar to the situation in Dallas. It says obviously McCarthy is very tenured and accomplished. It's not hard to surmise why he'd likely expect due respect. Everything has its own weight and impact on talks, adding that note for context towards what eventually happens in New Orleans. That's kind of interesting. That has my ears perked up a little bit there. But this last part is what I want to pay attention to. It says additionally, a lot of league perspectives have been given as to what owner Gail Benson should do when it comes to operations and her building in the future. I'll leave it at that for now. So obviously people around the league are, I don't know, I guess finally waking up to what Mickey Loomis is doing to the Saints organization, right? It sounds like people are noticing, and they're talking about what Gail Benson should do. That is embarrassing for one, but at the same time, maybe if this negative publicity that the Saints are getting right now could, cause her to make a move and do something with Mickey Loomis, then hey, I'll take all the negative publicity that we can take, right? Um, and this whole coaching cycle has just looked horrific on the Saints. They fired Dennis Allen early November, and now here they are, the last team that does not have a head coach. Why? Because the best candidates went to other organizations, more stable organizations. Either that or they stayed with their current teams. Aaron Glenn didn't even give him a second interview despite history with the organization. Joe Brady didn't even give him a second interview despite history with the organization. And now, the Saints, you're down to Kellen Moore, who, I mean, I guess he's had some duds. Let's not get it wrong. He's had some dud offenses. Let's just call it what it is. Mike Kafka, who is coming from the Giants, where he had his play calling duty stripped, and also doesn't have that quite good of a resume, for being honest, to be a head coach. Anthony Weaver, who was the Dolphins DC last year, who they were like kind of middle of the pack in the league. And I mean, like, what are we doing? And Mike McCarthy, a retread. It'll be his third team if he ends up the Saints head coach. So this whole coaching cycle has been just a shining light on how bad the Saints are ran. And oddly enough, just now I'm seeing a notification on my phone that Cliff Kingsbury is staying in Washington. So even he wasn't interested in the Saints job, because the Saints were definitely interested. They might spin it otherwise, but I can tell you, I know for a fact that they were. So it's just like, what are we doing at this point, man? You know, it's just, Mickey Loomis. I can guarantee you guys that if Mickey Loomis, if it was truly up to him, Dennis Allen would still be the head football coach of the Saints. I'm not even trolling. I'm being 100% dead serious. I truly believe that Dennis Allen would still be the head football coach of the Saints if Gail Benson didn't step in and do something about it. We're doomed.